I tell people when they're on this show, it's like a Tinder date where you both show up, I show up, no one texts their friend later and goes like, man, I was set up. Like, because if I know everything about you, I'm not going to show up. That's how I treat this.
So do we set up like the emergency call that like just in case?
Oh, my sister really needs me. Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about how you guys formed, because I know one of you was, I don't know if both of you were doing it, but I know, Nicole, you were doing musical theater, I believe. And from the bio that I've read on you, Armand, you were doing through different bands at Ryerson?
Yeah. I mean, I started my own bands in high school. Bands. And when I guess my first band broke up in like first year of school, I started to try to look for another band. Then I got bored and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to do my own thing. I was writing all the songs in the band anyway, so I'm just going to take them, make it acoustic, and put it a solo record. And that was fun because it did okay. I got to tour across Canada, so that was a lot of fun. And I think ever since then, I mean, there's been something. It's either been like a solo thing, or there was like one pop punk band after another during like that, like 2009 emo craze that we all went through. So it was fun. I mean, I had a blast playing in those bands as well. Then I did a second solo record, toured that one. I got back from that tour because it was something like 24 shows in 27 days. Like it was nuts.
Oh wow.
I remember driving home from that last show date, taking out the gear, stashing it in a closet, and being like, we are done with music for the next little while. 6 months later, I still didn't want to play music, and I was really eager to just jump back into something creative. And I pulled up my guitar, played it for about 5 minutes, and went, nope, that's going back away. So I, for whatever reason, decided to kind of like pick up on my high school days and jump back on stage and acting. And yeah, I think acting kind of took off, and acting's where I've been for the last, 7-8 years. So I honestly didn't think that music was going to, and then, cue the pandemic.
Yeah.
So
so explain to me, like, were you doing as well musical theater at Ryerson, or like, what were you at Ryerson as well?
Sorry, Nicole.
Yeah. No. So I'm originally from Nova Scotia, and
I guess by the last name. I was guessing by the last name that it was the East Coast. I was going to say like, well, one of them was from the East Coast, and judging by the last name, like, she has to be.
Yeah. So yeah, I originally didn't really have any plans to sort of go into performance at all, but then I really fell in love with it in high school. And started out at school in Newfoundland for theater, and then I moved to Toronto to pursue musical theater, which is the first time I ever had any kind of vocal training at all, which is kind of late in the game, I realized once I got here. But yeah, no. So I've been lucky enough that I've been able to sort of make a go of it a little bit in theater and musical theater around the city. And then Armand and I met in a show. 6 years ago, something like that.
2015. That's all.
Yeah, around that. 6 years ago. Anyway, and it was actually a show with a company that we both work for a lot that does, like, it's kind of a recurring thing. It's about Star Wars, actually. It's really fun. We're both big dorks as well. So through our Star Wars show that has happened a number of times, we sort of figured out that we like each other. We get along. We have a great time. And then we were both in a musical together called The Last 5 Years, which is just two people. So it's just the two of us on stage throughout the entire show. It's pretty well sung through. There's not very many spoken words. So we spent a couple of months working on that show, and obviously spent a lot of time together. We know we work really well together. We know that we have fun together outside of work. And then, I was sort of on tour with theater stuff for a while, and we hadn't really seen each other in a while. And then the pandemic happened. And in November, Armand was thinking of picking up another sort of solo album and trying that again. And he wanted to do a duet on that album. So he reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to sing with me on this duet? And I hadn't done anything in like over a year. And I was like, oh, God, please, yes. So we recorded one song together. It's a Taylor Swift cover that we turned into a duet called Red. And that was our first sort of single to go up on Spotify. And I was so excited because I've never, ever had, I love music and I've never had anything on Spotify or Apple Music or anything like that. So it was very much a first time for me. And even though we'd only planned on doing the one song, we really liked it. And so we decided to shoot a music video. And then we felt that since we had this music video, it deserved like a proper launch. So we, in like 2 days, just compiled some covers of songs that we like, and we did like a virtual concert, and people really liked that. So we decided to record an EP, and then like with those covers. And then by the time that EP was like on its way to coming out into the world, we were already sort of talking about maybe writing some songs of our own together.
By the way, all of this is in the span of like 2 months.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, way to keep active and way to almost give yourselves heart attacks at the same time.
Oh yeah, it's been a whirlwind.
It's like, I don't think we haven't stopped since I think the day that like since the day you came over and like we first recorded vocals for Red. It's been nonstop, and it's been great though. It's been a really good way to, I think it just saved the pandemic for me. Like it got me out of the pandemic. Because realistically, like we were at the point in our careers artistically when we were doing stage, individually where we were like, I was ready to quit my day job. I was ready to basically like, I'm making enough on stage right now that I can actually just abandon it all, which is great. And then the pandemic hit, and we're like, oh, so there goes everything.
Yeah. Like everything we worked for years.
Like 15 years, and it's gone.
I want to ask, like, I don't mean to cut you off there, but I did think this was interesting when you said earlier about, like, taking, after doing, I think you said, like, 24 shows or so in, like, 27 days, but, like, putting away the guitar, putting away the instrument, and then taking it out for just, like, 5 minutes, and then going, like, okay, I'm not ready. Like, so what got you to that point where you make the phone call, you get your, like, because I've been in it, like, to be honest, when COVID hit, I was like, who the is going to want to do interviews when there's nothing to talk about? And then I'm sitting there like, why am I going to do it? Where am I going to do it from? My room? Like, who's going to want to see a 29-year-old in their room trying to do interviews? But at the same point, I was like, what about if you do get an act on that's like, oh my God, like Nicole said, I am doing nothing. It's like, yes, I will come on, and yeah, we will talk about gummy bears if that's all you want to talk about. We will talk about something. So yeah, I was just amazed because I was in the same boat as you. It's like, I'm doing a job, and then I want to do podcasting on the side. And I guess it's just the luck of the draw that I was like, okay, let's be persistent. Let's go do this. And I don't think if I didn't, I wouldn't have got like someone like a Bob Saget on the podcast. And I look back at that and I'm like, that's a small victory. So I feel like to you guys, yes, it's 2 months of just nonstop working, but you're getting exposure. You're getting yourselves more active in something that you enjoy. But take me through that process of when did it click of like, let's do this. Like I'm I've spent 5 minutes from not wanting to do it to let's go.
Like I said, pandemic made a huge difference. Obviously, I'd been doing virtual events with this other production that I'm in, and it was fun, but like it's literally the same show every single time for a bunch of corporates, and it gets tiring after a while. But it pays the bills, so you can complain. I think so my partner in that other production, her and I just got together and started recording a bunch of covers. We decided to just take covers and just completely strip them down and make them so depressing.
That's how you do it.
It was very fitting for the pandemic, right? Like we took You're the One That I Want from Greece, and when you hear, you're like, Mike, duh, that's terrifying.
It's beautiful. It's haunting. It's not what you'd expect.
So I think that kept us going, and then I know she had some other projects going on at the time. So now that I was actually actively playing, I'm like, all right, you know what? Let's like pull out some of the old songs and see if we still like any of them. There were a couple that still kind of made the cut, and I think it started to get to the point where like I had a couple of songs in the works, and like, all right, these are they're starting to go somewhere, but let's play it safe, and let's start with I know there's a couple duets, and one of them is Red, and I love this song, so let's start there, because if this works, then maybe everything else will work too. And I was so happy that Nicole said yes to come over and do it because like, you know, somebody that I worked with quite a bit in the past. And I think that's what sparked it. I think like actually hearing a studio version of something that you've done rather than just like a voice recording on your phone.
Yeah.
That's where it clicked, you know, because it felt like we were being very, very productive. And that was really like, it was a nice gift. It was a nice feeling. I can honestly tell you that duet was kind of where I figured things would kind of stop. I'm like, all right, well, we got the one duet. Maybe we'll release it. Maybe we won't. But it's cool to have. We have something to show for this pandemic.
Yeah. No.
I was gonna say, like, if you had told me that 5 months later, like we'd have an album out and this Instagram account that's going nuts and like all these like all the things that we're doing right now, no, like not a chance. Like it's moved at such a fast pace, and I think a lot of that has to do with just the way we work together. We have this like weird hive mind that when we're writing or when we're coming up with ideas, whether it's just like it's something like artwork or whether it's a song or just a lyric, you know, I'll be writing a lyric. I'm like, blah 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 blah, and then she'll just immediately just finish the last word. I'm like, yep, that's
exactly
where I was going with it.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I think it honestly came out from a night of red wine and being bored of pulling out my guitar, and then that turning into, you know, this, which is always good. It's always a great thing.
No, like I think it's interesting going through that whole story that you went, like the whole kind of roller coaster there. But I do think it's interesting because, again, somewhat like what Nicole went off of, the point of when you finally see something that's no longer on your phone as like a voice memo and it's actually out in the world and people listen to it. Like, I mean, just doing through podcasting, I think this took about maybe 2 years to really, and it's not like it took 2 years because I'm lazy, which I like to just kind of make the joke at, because people are like, well, don't ask Brian to do stuff because it's going to take him like years to do it. I'm like, great, no one's going to ask me to do things. That's awesome. But it was like I sat down in a room one day with my roommate, and first this was actually supposed to be like a sports kind of podcast, and trial and error. It was like, oh, let's do like updates on like Ottawa sports. It's like that happened on the weekend, and you're going to put them out on Monday. It's like that doesn't make sense. So I just got into doing interviews, and again, it's not like you have an ego about it. It was just like, who's going to listen to it? Like, who's really going to give a shit about, at this point, a 25-year-old opinion on stuff? And then I was like, all right, who cares? Even if like two people are like, I listened to it, I think your opinions are shit, but okay. So when we started doing interviews, I was like, okay, like let's put it on Spotify, let's put it on SoundCloud, let's put it on platforms and see. And I get surprised sometimes when you get like some comments, like on, I think it was like Carlo's video I had posted a few weeks ago, and someone's like, really good interview. I like that you asked these questions. I was like, I only asked them because I was interested. I don't know if you were, but great, like awesome. So, I mean, if someone listens to this interview and was like, yeah, I really like the interview you did with Broadtree, I was like, great, awesome. It's like I interviewed them because they were nice enough to come on. But I think that's the like small part of it that's a little bit humbling at times, where you're just like, who's going to listen? And it's like, well, maybe who will, and see what they think. Because I've actually gone and listened to your covers. And again, like I tell everyone on this podcast, I shoot from the hip. And it's like, you know, there's good, there's bad. And for yours, I like the intros, because the intros, I think, and hopefully this is a compliment for you guys. But like, it reminds me of almost like a Phoebe in a Central Perk. That's how I see it, as not her singing, but just that's where I envision it, where it's like,
that is going to press quotes. That's like on our like list of pressers. That's going to be.
Yeah.
Now you're saying we have to cover Smelly Cat next.
Yeah. No. I mean, if you want to, but that's how I get, because it's just the intro is so peaceful, and I feel like I'm at a coffee shop where people are performing, and I'm like, okay, this is good. The only thing, this is where the slight comes. It's like, why so many Taylor Swift songs? Why? Why?
So one of the things, like especially right after the album came out, is we were promoting our own stuff so much on Instagram that we started to get messages of like, cool, but like, are you guys gonna like start playing stuff that I know?
Yeah.
And we got a few of those messages, so we're like, okay, well, what if we don't want to like inundate our Instagram with covers? Like, what if we just try to think of a way, like, let's do a weekly series, we'll call it Broadtree Does, and every it was supposed to be every 4 episodes, and then 4 turned into 6, and now 6 is turning into 7.
Yeah.
But basically, the concept is like every now 6 weeks we'll have a theme. And Taylor Swift is kind of reverted, so we did those, and now the next one is like Canadian artists. So I think we've done. What was the first one we did?
We did Life is a Highway.
We did Tom Cochrane. We just did BNL.
Ladies, yeah.
So we have like everything from like that to Arkells to Bryan Adams, because everyone in the world will know that song. So, yeah, I mean, like it's nice to be able to kind of have like a different theme to what we're doing, and it opens up a little bit of a challenge too, because pulling a leather jacket by the Arkells and going like, cool, how do we make this an acoustic duet? This should be fun. But and I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan, so yes,
that's fair. I mean, that's the challenge, right? Where it's like you're putting out your own music, and then sometimes that people stumble across that. But of course, yeah, when you do covers, people obviously know that song, and if they like your cover, they'll come back to it. Like my favorite one to come back to, and like I kind of hope he gets exposure for it, but like when they were doing the Friends reunion, and of course you have the Friends theme. It's blanking off me now, but I think it's like I'll look. I think it's Boyce Avenue, and he does a really good acoustic one. And I'm like, man, like if a lot of people had to give that more exposure, I'm sure a lot of people do. But if the company that was making this Friends reunion had to know this song existed or his cover, I would love that to be the ending, like where they do the piece, because it's a really good acoustic cover. And of course, no one's going to check out Boyce Avenue's original song because they're like, who cares? But the cover gives him some more exposure for people to go see his original music. I mean, I also like during this conversation, I don't know if you noticed, and I was kind of like trying to keep my eyes on you guys. A dog appeared in the background, and I was like, okay, he's struggling to get on the couch. I hope he gets on the couch.
She's just a detention whore. That's our mascot.
Okay, she wants to be included too.
Yeah.
But yeah, like again with your covers, I do enjoy them. It's just like when I notice a lot of Taylor Swift, I'm like, okay, the Red is coming. I get it now. Where the Red, and then it's doing the covers. And again, if it's kind of to give you somewhat of a social media credit here as well, Taylor Swift is releasing like old albums, and so if people look up say Taylor Swift or whatever, and they stumble across your versions, maybe they're like, oh, I like this sound. Let's see if they have original stuff. I like that as well. So. Yeah, kudos to you for that.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, it's as much fun as it is. It's also like strategically, it's always interesting to see like the follower count just jump up.
Yeah.
I look at it, like, I mean, if you just look at the graph, but always on the Wednesday leading into the Thursday, there's always a little bump right after the Taylor Swift one. It hasn't been as good with the Canadian ones, but we'll take it.
Well, but a lot of our audience is actually like American and UK, so that might actually kind of make sense.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, that kind of works in your favor in a sense too. Like, it's nothing against Canadian content, but it's like the exposure to the States, the UK, it's a big deal because let's not kid yourselves. Like, that's kind of they're bigger geographically or whatever whatever the phrase is for that. But yeah, like I look at it from even when I go on Instagram and you see sponsored ads or sponsored artists, and I think it was like Griff with Black Hole, and I'm like, never knew this artist existed only for this, and I'm like, oh, I don't care where you're from because it's music. But when I found out it was like UK, I was like, never would have guessed it. But now that you mention it, now I can see it. But I was like, I just like the song. So we've actually stumbled across ones from like Ottawa. And I was like, I think you sound like you're from LA. And it's like, oh, they're from Ottawa? It's like, okay, great. I'm glad that it doesn't really just come across that way. Because if just say, although they're already famous, like if Bare Naked Ladies came out with Canada Dry as their first single, I'm like, all right, I get it. You're Canadian. All right, like I've already got you labeled, but but I know you're Canadian now, and you're already successful. So yeah, I don't care if you're labeled. But yeah, it's interesting to me because when you said about UK and how it goes peaking up, mine doesn't. Mine goes the other way. No, mine goes in the toilet. It's literally when I go on now on
the tank, like
inviting future guests on. I'll be like, this is the podcast where we're just going in the shitter, and they're just like, what am I into? Like. But no, obviously it's great. And again, I like the covers. But tell me what makes you decide which covers and which duets? Because I know when you were saying you wanted to make these kind of happy songs a little bit sad or dramatic because of COVID, I'm like, man, Like, there are going to be people out there that like that, but I was thinking the vice versa, where you take an Adele song where it's like "Hello from the Other Side," you're like "Hello from the Other Side," but
well, so that was the other project that I was playing around with last summer. For as far as covers go between the two of us, I think a lot of, I mean, we usually just, I'm trying to think of like the right word to say it, but like, I think we just try to have fun with them as much as we can. Like, I don't think we've had a cover that we've had so far that we've been like, let's make it slow and sad and a ballad. If anything, like we'll some of the slower songs we just try to speed up and just have a little bit more fun with.
Yeah.
The whole like sad making happy, like that's the theme of the album from like start to finish. Like, I don't know if that was the transition, but yeah, no, I think, you know, we pick covers based on like the Taylor Swift covers. I think we picked based on just you got 3, I got 3.
Yeah, ones we knew,
ones we loved, the ones we figured that like people would
like and know, and
and most of them are pretty old, so like all the new fans are just gonna be like, we don't know this song. We're like, yeah, no, it's ours.
Yeah, right. But yeah, no, the other fun thing about it is when we find, because we're, you know, theater people, and so we really like the idea of like having characters and telling a story, and so it's fun a lot of the times to find songs that are not duets that we can. Rarely do we even do songs that are duets. We usually do song that is not intended to be a duet, and then we turn it into one, and we find these sort of new layers of meaning with the back and forth, which it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of, because to look at a song and be like, oh, if we did it like this, then it's like this character is doing this. And
I'm actually trying to think, because I actually don't think we've ever done an actual duet.
I don't know. Oh, Rewrite the Stars, I guess.
The Stars,
but other than that, I don't think. And Strangers.
Right.
But other than that, usually we
you need to look at I think like this is like the 90s kid in me that says this, but also the trendy side, because of course that's what social media is. But it's like, do a Britney cover, find a Britney song.
We have a Britney cover on our Christmas EP.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. I would like to see, just personally speaking, it's like, I think it's like, you want a piece of me or a piece of me, and just to see how to just be like, all right, that's a really poppy song. How are you gonna make that acoustic? It's like, so you want a piece of me? It's like, yeah, tough.
Well, I think Lucky's come up more often than not.
Yeah, we're gonna do a cover of Lucky at some point.
I like Lucky. It's fun to look back at it, because as a kid I was just like, yeah, you got Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. Like, you don't really dive into the whole meaning of the songs, and it's kind of sad in a way, because I feel like Lucky is a really, really
great song.
What's going through right now with her. But at the time I was like, fuck the popular girl, I don't give a shit. But that's a wicked ass song. And now I'm just like, oh yeah, I didn't know that was going through. It's like when you listen to, I kind of want to put it in this sense, but I think it's like, I'm blanking on the name, but there's another song where it's a country singer, Ballerini, who sings about Homecoming Queen, Kelsey Ballerini. And that's how I kind of relate to that, to Lucky, like just based on what I hear now. But I'm like, man, like there's kids out there that are like, I love this song. It's like, I love Kelsey Ballerini. But then as they get older, like, oh, that's what she was singing about? Oh, that's kind of depressing. I'm like, well, there you go. At least you learned. But yeah, I want to ask you, of course, when you were talking about creating this album in COVID, tell me like a little bit about the mental health part, because I know you were really open about that. And I know when I posted, I don't post a lot about mental health. It's just because, like, yeah, you can ask me and I'll talk about it. It's like disability. I'll talk about my disability, but you know, I don't want to brag and be like, I have a disability, let's talk about it. It's like, all right, relax. Like, we get it. But yeah, tell me a little bit about that during COVID, your mental health during this album. Like, how did it all come to be? I know you said like it's been steady go, but have there been times where you've had to like take a step back and just be like, okay, today, let's just get this done and then we'll call it a day? Or has it always been like, we got to get to this goal or I'm going to lose my shit?
I think if anything, like after the album came out, after the first week, we realized we're like, we need to organize.
Yeah.
Like, we actually need to, like, just literally, even if it's a sheet of paper to like keep ourselves in check. Now we have like spreadsheets and like our Google Drive was like
moving on up in the world.
But I think, you know, like mental health leading into their, like, I think COVID has been one of the best things in a way, and like, you know, best thing I'll put for for mental health as a whole, because for once people are talking about it, and they're talking about their own mental health, and people before
and thinking about it.
And those conversations are ones that I could never imagine having with people. I could never imagine people actually being willing to do or have those combos. So that's been great. It's actually been really nice to have people opening up and saying like, oh my God, this is what I've been going through. What do you guys go, and like actually have that conversation, which is the best part. I mean, it's not a comparison or anything like that, but it's nice to have that dialogue. I will say that I think, with our diagnosis and having so much experience with it over like the last decade, it kind of helped us get through COVID at the beginning, or at least that side of it, the side that was attacking everybody else. We kind of just we're like, that's just that's a Monday for us. So I think the best part about it was just being able to have those conversations with people that were finally able to to talk about it. But it was, as it led into the album, it became a really good theme to kind of have on there, and it became a really good outlet, I think, to finally write songs about stuff that I don't know. When if I'm thinking about like 5-6 years ago, I don't know if I would have been able to write songs about the stuff, like songs about being borderline or songs about being bipolar. Like there's those, they're not the kind of topics that people usually want to hear about. At least not in music. Like it's just, and it's not, oh, I feel sad or I feel low. Like we don't like to sugarcoat it. We're pretty flat out with it. We're like, here's the reality, but let's start a conversation, because if we stay, I don't know, if we hide behind some of the words that a lot of people tend to do, it leaves that wall up.
I feel like who really benefited out of the COVID, like if anyone did, it was pets. Pets love COVID.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. I was like, because Phantom is Armand's dog. I was like, oh my God, what a perfect time to get a puppy, because then you have all this time to train it and blah, 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 blah. And then I thought to myself, like, but then if you go back to normal life, it's going to be so confused, because it's used to happen there constantly, and now you're just gone. So is that almost worse? Like,
see, I mean, I think Phantom is the exception, because I would say by like the third week, the look I was getting was like, can you fucking leave, please? Like, you would normally be at work, right? You're normally gone for 8 hours, and I would normally go and do things that I'm not allowed to do. Yeah. And here we are. You're like, people say dogs don't have a concept of time. Like, her attitude has changed so much. And you see it too. Like,
she's got such an attitude. It's so funny.
And it's not even like an aggressive attitude. It's like a 15-year-old girl's attitude. Like a spoiled 15-year-old.
It's just like roll the eyes.
I guarantee you that is a look that she has given it like multiple times. Just like, oh.
I just think it's interesting, because it's like, I had a dog, so I came from Ottawa to Newfoundland, like for Christmas, and then COVID happened. But now luckily it's my brother's dog, so him and his partner, they're pretty much home all the time. But I felt bad because when they were at work, I wasn't working at this point, so I was home with the dog all the time, and he loved it. But now it's like, I'm sure there's a part where it's like, oh, I kind of miss Brian, and now you guys are home all the time, so yeah, I enjoy it. But once it's all over, there is a point that I'm sure the dog's like, all right, like this is a little bit awkward, but I can start doing this again. Like in my mind, I don't know. I was grown up by Disney, so I blame Disney for me thinking everything talks. So like, I feel like when we leave for the day, the dogs are like, yeah, that like we have 2 dogs, so it's like, yeah, they're gone for the day. Let's talk about shit. And now it's like they're always here. How often can we be silent? We have to wait for them to sleep, and I'm still talking code. Like, yeah. It's to a point where I'm pretty sure people think I'm crazy when I walk up to a dog and I'm like, they understand what we're saying. It's like, they understand the word treat. A dog understands this stuff, right? But in my mind, I'm like, there's definitely dog conversations on the side where it's like, yeah, Frank, they're still home. We'll tell them to leave. What do you want me to do? Bark at you while you walk by? Yes, that will get them upset. I am going to walk by at 1 o'clock. You be ready. Okay. So, yeah, to each their own. But I want to ask you, to get back on like the kind of the music side of things here. I want to ask you, how did you come up with the name for Broadtree?
Oh man. Okay,
Just
so
tell you.
people have told us. Okay, so first when we first released our first EP and when we first released Red, we just needed a name to put it under.
Yeah.
So we just called ourselves A&N for Armand and Nicole. And that is not easy to find. We had a YouTube channel. We were on Spotify and Apple Music and SoundCloud and all these things, and no one could ever find us because the A, like in a band name, doesn't come up in searches, and the ampersand doesn't either. So we were literally just N, which people could never find us, and it didn't really have like a very good ring to it and whatever.
Like, literally, if you had us in your Spotify or Apple Music library, it would be under N. Like that's where it would always get categorized under B. So searching.
So it wasn't ideal, and we had we really came out with it very quickly. We didn't really put a lot of thought into it or anything. So when we released the album, we actually had the album fully written. I think it was fully recorded, and it was like right before we were going to distribute it.
It was a week before we had to deliver it.
Before we had to deliver it to our distributor, and we were like trying to think like, okay, should we come up with another name so that we can release the album under a real sort of band name?
By the way, this is all an internal dialogue that she's having because I wasn't part of this conversation.
No, I came to rehearsal one day and I said, because people have described our music in a very, it's different to say the least. People have described it as like musical theater over country, which is very strange, but people seem to like it. So, and we'll take it. Why not? We're both theater kids. So I came into rehearsal one day and I was like, Armand, what about Broadtree? Broadway plus country.
Oh, nice. Okay. I see where you're getting at. I was going to say, I thought it was going to be like Broadway meets Treehouse, but.
That's pretty good. I like that. But
you've been enough kids theater like that.
That's true. But I like the imagery as well. I like the imagery a lot, and I like that sort of natural, sort of grounded feel. I think it fits our sound really well. Yeah. It's got a nice ring to it. We both love it. So.
I was thinking like to kind of create my own image of it when it said like Broadtree. I was thinking like, again, it makes sense now knowing the background, but just say if you didn't know the background, when I first kind of seen on Instagram, like you liked one of my posts or like you commented, I was like, at first I was like, why is a tree company following me? And then the second thing I was like, okay, Broadtree. And then like, I was like, obviously we do music and we interview acts. So I'm like, there has to be somewhere there. And I was like, okay, like Broadtree. And then I was like, okay, this sounds very organic. It sounds, again, like country related because you think countryside, trees, meadows, what have you. And then my image was like one big gigantic tree in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, okay. But now it's like a musical thing where people like go around this tree and they sing and they dance. So I was like, that makes sense to me.
See,
that's
I
where
love
my mind went.
That's exactly the imagery we want to convey. Yes. Go ahead. I'm really happy.
I think Armand is just like looking at me like, that's not what I wanted to create at all.
Honestly,
exactly perfect.
Yeah, I mean, when the name came in, there was a moment of like, it's almost kind of like my brain froze of like, I need to process that for a second. Like, because it sounds catchy, but will people get? It was that like, will people get the meaning? Will people like it? Oh, do we have to change? That entire and I also love when people are like, oh, you guys are called Broadtree, and then Nicole will always answer like, just think of a big tree.
Because I feel a little kitschy being like, oh, it's Broadway plus country, because it's like, like you're in a relationship and it's like, oh, I don't know, freaking, Riverdale is the first thing that's coming to my mind. Like Archie and Veronica, Varchie, like that sort of dumb thing.
Like Benifer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I feel kind of kitschy telling people what it is. I like them to like not know, but I know and I like it. So.
No, it's interesting. I always find it interesting, like when bands or duets or whatever, like have a meaning to a name, and that's not a knock on other people who don't. But it's like, I like the Arkells. I liked Headley, even though Headley seems like, oh God, don't mention Headley. I'm like, no, that's fine. We can mention Headley. Like, who gives a shit? But it's like, Headley came from, I believe it's like BC, but it's named after a place in BC. Arkells is named after Arkell Street. Yep. Halsey is named after it's actually Ashley, just rearranged. And I'm like, that's really cool.
It's cool.
And it's all, and I think it's like there's a Halsey Street. I think if it's New Jersey or New York where she's from. And I'm like, cool. Like, to me, it's interesting because that could have taken like 5 minutes out of their day, but they're like, no, we actually thought that through. I'm like, really? Like, I'm glad you're trying to explain this more to me. But in my mind, it's almost like you sat there one day, it was like, Brian, let's rearrange Brian. Roblon, that's my new band name, Roblon. And they're like, you spent 5 seconds at that. And I'm like, it's like, you don't know that. I could tell you I spent an hour dissecting everything. Like
months and months of decision making.
Yeah, well, I made the joke on a past podcast where I was like, I wanted to be in a band one time, and when you mentioned earlier about the whole emo phase, I wasn't in the emo phase, but I was kind of there. But I was like, I don't want to be emo, I want to be punk. So I was like, I like the color blue, and for some reason, I'm like, okay, emo's big, so let's think death. So I was like, bleth, and then they're like, what kind of songs are you going to sing? I was like, man, it's going to be like pop country, and they're like, people are going to be confused going to your concerts. They're like, I came to see Bless. And then they're going to be like, and the cat in the cradle in silver spoon. And they're like, who is this guy?
Yeah, I think we managed to nail when if people go to Broadtree, they'll be like, this sounds like a Broadtree.
Yeah.
Well, like, let's put it this way. When I think of like, even though you can market it around your music or market around your name, like I think Counting Crows, I know what I'm expecting from Counting Crows. Same with Matchbox 20. But it's like if someone said to me tomorrow, it's like, oh, REM got a new album out. I'd be like, okay, cool. And then it's like something completely not weird. I'm just there like, I don't what? Like I always expect REM to be a little bit out there and Counting Crows to be like that kind of alternative sound. If it's like 1975, when I heard the 1975 the first time, I'm like, oh, what a weird band name. And then I was like, oh, interesting music. Okay, that goes well together. But if it's like 1975 and they sing 1960s music, I'm like, I think you missed the mark there, guys. But yeah, so band names obviously are important. But there are band names out there like Blink-182, which you're like, where'd the 182 come from? They're like, we're never telling you. Mariana's Trench, they're like, we just thought it was a cool name. I'm like, there's more to it. There's more to it. You tell me. It'll take it to their grave. I'm sure when they like all 3 of them die, or in Mariana's Trench case, I think there's like 5 of them. It's like CBC or CTV, like, you finally want to know about this band name? I'm like, yes. They're like, literally, they seen it in a newspaper and thought it was cool. I'm like, you mother.
Thing we've been waiting 50 years for.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still surprised because I think I watch a lot of like Nickelodeon TV and like Disney, and I believe they were like talking about the vault and it's supposed to be opened in like 2034 or something. I'm like, I should be alive for that, but I would be so disappointed if they opened the vault and they're like, here's an old YTV clip of I'd be like, you wasted my whole life for a clip that I can look up on YouTube.
But I mean, that's a stellar show. I love that show.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, that's my goal, to at least make it to the vault. And then when it comes out, I will look at my, like, at this point, I hope I have kids. Maybe I won't, but I have a niece and nephew. I'll be like, you don't understand, man. I waited a long time for this. They'll be like on their iPad, be like, I see it right now on my iPod. I'm like, you don't understand. I don't think they were expecting iPods. I think they were expecting it to watch on TV. So each their own. I want to ask you, of course, now about your, I believe it's your new song, Be As. Tell me a little bit more about that. And I read, and I've seen, because I have eyes. Imagine if I didn't. Imagine if I was like, I haven't seen or I haven't read anything. I'm just going off of instinct. But it's been getting like good reviews. People have been liking it. So tell me a little bit more about this song and like how did it come to be? And where do you want it to go? Obviously, people are going like, I want more attention for my song, obviously. But where do you guys want it to go?
Well, Be As is a really special song. So it's sort of a reimagining of a Prozac song. You know Prozac?
Of course I know Prozac.
Oh,
yes.
Good. Yeah, we love Prozac. And we it's
you think I have some kind of strange disease over here?
Yeah, so it's a song that meant a lot. It's sort of an anthem, and it's a song that meant a lot to both of us growing up, and I think to a lot of people growing up. So we, Pride was coming up. There was a lot of things going on in the world and in the country that are very sort of negative, and we were thinking about that, and Be As came up, which is one of the most amazing songs that Prozac has because of the meaning in it. And we wanted to sort of reinvent that for 2021.
Yeah, and I mean, back in '99 when it came out,
that's when we freeze frame that, and then we add like, and we just look at like,
it was an anthem that was primarily for, I mean, we were listening to Prozac. We were at that age, like 12, 13, 14. People who were listening to that song who, were still in the closet. And I mean, it was a very different time when it came to coming out. I mean, you had to be, I'm going to argue that even braver than you have to be today, because it was a completely different environment. So, when you listen to a lot of the words in that original song, it was really about just like, who you are is okay, be proud of that, and whatever you decide you want to do, that's fine. Like, be happy, like, be proud of that. Yeah. So we love that message, but we went like, okay, so with just all like the riots and the protests that happened last year, and just even like a lot of the like just the terrorist attacks that we've had at home, everything that's based on race and based on based on religion and like everything about who you are. I'm like, can we take that song and rewrite it and rework it so that it has a bigger message about just being proud of who you are? It doesn't necessarily have to be pride with a capital P. It's just pride as a whole. And that's where we took it. I think we looked at every single line, every aspect
you could be judged of in your life, any sort of lifestyle or thing about your identity that you could be judged negatively for, basically.
And once
being a Detroit Red Wings fan. No, I'm only kidding.
We could probably work that in. But no, we took all of that. We rewrote kind of stories for each of the individual characters that are within that. We decided not to repeat the chorus, and each chorus to be a different part of a different identity. Yeah. And I think once we had it, the last thing that we needed to do, because the original song had
sort of testimonials towards the last about 2/3 of the way through. They have a bunch of kids that come in and they say, hi, I'm Becky from Colorado. Be as you want, and they sort of give their little message of inspiration.
So we decided to instead we did a call out for everyone. So like we were looking for people to make a statement about who they are, not about your sexuality. I mean, it can be, but it can be anything. It can be what you identify as when it comes to gender, or your religion, or your background. Where you're from. Literally, like your job. I mean, we've had people that were like, "I'm a teacher." I'm like, "That's great. Like that's something to celebrate. That's something to be proud of." So everybody basically sent in a voice, like, "I'm so and so. I'm blank," and then we left the blank open of like, "Be as," and we just left it blank, and we said, "Fill that out however you want, and then just record your voice, send it back over to us," and it became this beautiful little collage of like 20 people. Just speaking over one another, basically saying like, "I'm so and so, and I'm this." Be as proud, or be as black as you want to be as gay as you want to be whatever you want to be. And I think that was the magical side of that song.
I still can't listen to those voices without getting goosebumps. It's beautiful. Oh, yeah? I love it. It's definitely the most meaningful part of the song.
Yeah. But I think in terms of what it did, I mean, it made its rounds, and I think
it's blown up. Really,
it's blown up. In the
best possible way, yeah. But more importantly,
I would hope not. I hope it wasn't like it blew up and it was just garbage. I'd be like, that's a weird way to say
that.
The night we released it, so we released that on the typical Friday midnight release, and we had a couple of things happen. So at around 2 a.m., I got a phone call from my cousin, in Florida.
Okay.
My cousin doesn't call me. I don't know why she this was. So I'm like, oh no, my heart went I went to the worst place. I'm like, did somebody else die? So I picked it up, and she's like, I didn't pick it up. So I sent a message. I'm like, what's up? She's like, I need to tell you something. So we picked up the phone, and she basically said that within those 2 hours, she had a friend who had a daughter who was gay, but was terrified about coming up to her mother. She had come up to her father. And her dad heard the song, said, "You need to listen to this song." She heard it and basically said, "She's like, I think I should tell mom tomorrow." And we were just like, what?
Yeah.
We got a message the next day from somebody, a few hours later, from somebody who said,
some stranger we've never met,
who just
No
gave us this
connection.
long spiel about, you know, the fact that he's been in the closet for the longest time. You know,
His family's very religious, and
he didn't know where to start, and then he basically said like he felt that song was written for him, and he was seeing his parents on Sunday, and he felt like maybe now is the best time to actually tell them.
Yeah.
So like, as far as when you ask the question of like how far we want that song to go, honestly, like our goal at the very beginning of this was like, if this can hit one person, somehow make a difference, we've done our job. And the fact that like we're still getting messages, and we're still getting people that are telling us that, you know, this song is making a difference in their lives or making a difference in their friends' lives. I don't know. I think like that's
what more could you possibly want?
That's the biggest accomplishment we could ever have.
Yeah, like I kind of bringing it back to when we would start earlier, when you were talking about, you know, pre-COVID and when COVID was starting, and you were saying like, okay, like I kind of want to bring it full circle, and hopefully it doesn't get too emotional here, but it was like, you know, when you're saying I'm going to play this for 5 minutes and you throw it away, like, so if you don't go through all this process, you don't get to this point. And it's the same with like, you know, putting your song on Spotify, and you're like, well, who's going to care? Who's going to listen? One person listens. One person takes it and runs with it and like does what they want. They can either be like, it's a great song, but I'm still not doing that. Or they'd be like, oh, it's inspiring, and I'm going to like say what I have to say. I was going to be like, well, you know where you can find that song? www.nevergetover.
See,
I'm not going to, because I think that ruined the moment. The moment was so sincere, and then I was like, man, I have to find a way to put this somewhere. But yeah, to bring it back to the wholesome side. But yeah, I think that's interesting, because when you were talking about, of course, changing the chorus, like Be As whatever, and getting people to implement it, my first thought went to Mike Posner's Be As You Are, because that's a really good song. That's kind of like a same message. And then my other one kind of went to kind of the Canadian reference, Shania Twain's, when she talks about, like, I guess it's like an empowering women song, because that's what Shania does. She's always done that. Like, I know people are like, well, Taylor Swift's done it too, and now it's like Olivia Rodrigo. I'm like, no, Shania, then Taylor, then Olivia, get it in order. But I was like, she's, and I don't know if it's such a popular song, but it's like she's not just a pretty face, or she's just not a pretty, and like every kind of chorus in that, or every lyric gets into like a different field of what a woman is, or what she, like, whatever she's doing as her job. I'm like, that's kind of cool. Because I guess at that time when she came out with it, she's like, yeah, I'm going to empower women. But it's just not like, I'm just not a singer, I'm this on the side, or I'm just not a mom, I'm also this. And like when people do those songs, it's inspiring. But when, I'm sure Shania, like if we ever get her on, or if she ever like returns a phone call, she would tell you the same thing, where it's like, yeah, I've got voicemails, or I've had messages that were like, I like that song. Like at one point I thought I was just someone's mom, but I'm more than someone's mom. So, you know, in your case, Be As, if there's people coming to you and being like, I am more than just this, or I'm actually going to come out and tell my parents this, or it's giving me more pride to say that. I'm like, well, yeah, that's the kind of the point of music.
Yeah.
Yeah, like to kind of go full circle. And I guess a little aspect of my own, there's certain lines in certain songs that you like really, really hit you. And for some reason, for like Sing for the Moment by Eminem, I don't know why it's this one, but it's like the one where he gets, like, Eminem is always kind of mad, enraged, but I'm like, the inner child in me is like, yeah, I'm mad and enraged too. So it's like, there's like one lyric in it, it's like, maybe they'll admit it when we're gone, let our spirits live on. And I'm just like, man, just the way that like everything comes together, the way the beat drops and everything, I'm like, that's airy. But I'm like, I get what he's saying. But I'm sure there's other kids like, it's just a lyric, Brian. I'm like, no, you don't get it. When Eminem dies, that's what I'm going to come back to and be like, maybe people will admit that he was onto something instead of criticizing him all the time. They're like, it's just a song. I'm like, we're going to just go around this loop, I guess, for the next hour. But like in that 70s show when he's like, they have a boat that drives, or it's like, they have a car that drives on water, man. I'm like, that's my version of that. It's like, but I want to ask you as well, because of course doing their covers, your own original content as well, like how do you find, I guess, the social media aspects? Like, because I know you said like you're really pushing to get more content out there and get people more engaged, but I'm just interested from, I guess you said you started kind of when the pandemic started, so like have you gained like a big following? Have people started coming? Like, because it takes a while to get a following. Like I know when I post this at Wednesdays at midnight, it still takes time for people to be like, okay, Wednesday at midnight he drops a new episode. Like, are you starting to see the trend come now when you drop a new? Like,
I think having that consistent Broadtree Does feature that's helped quite a bit, because it's all about engagement, right? I think this pandemic's been interesting because it's allowed us to focus on social so much.
Yeah.
If this didn't exist and we were going about our days, like we'd have 50 followers because we just
no time.
We wouldn't have time, and I wouldn't be putting in we wouldn't be putting in the time and the effort and the research and the understanding to figure out, like, okay,
I still don't.
How do I like understanding insights, understanding like best times to post and like what not to post, like all those little tiny things, and like how to engage. Like those are things that, you know, I'd never really kind of focused on before. And but like we have shifts to manage. Like this is the organization, but like we have shifts of like, cool. So on Mondays at 3 and at 6, you're checking and you're engaging. On Tuesdays at 12 and 9, I'll take it. So it's become such an essential part of it. Yeah, we built the following. I mean, we have a lot of people that like we see constantly that like our posts, which is great.
And that's the fun part of it too. Is like there's that push that's sort of like the I don't know, the management part of it too. That's like about like, oh, how do we gain followers and how do we blah blah blah. But it's also it's interesting to make those connections, because we have these people that we talk to regularly, fans and fellow artists and stuff like that we make these connections with, that will repeatedly have conversations with us and comment on our posts, and it'll become a conversation, and that's cool. Like I like that genuineness to it.
I think that's been one of our favorite parts. I think one of the biggest challenges that, you know, is that we're trying to, I think, wrap our heads around, especially like in the next 2-3 months. It's great that like we have such a great US following and such a weirdly large UK following. I don't know how, but I'll take it.
I'm big in India, so
that's epic.
Our like the Canadian one is lower, and the reason that's concerning is like live, like we're going to get to start playing live soon, which is exciting because we haven't been able to do that unless there's cameras around. But you know, it goes back into the old like avenues of like, oh, like I used to use Facebook nonstop, and then the album came out, and I think I've opened Facebook maybe once a week.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Because the focus has been so heavy on Instagram, and it just, you know, we're engaging with people in such a different way. But I know that, you know, when we start to play shows, it's going to be it's going to feel like, you know, the old days of please come to my show. But I think the bonus side this time around is that people are going to be itching to do it. And I think everyone's going to be so willing to. This is me with wishful thinking, but I know that like if I have friends that are going to say like, hey, come to my show, I'm like, absolutely. Because we have a whole new outlook on a lot of this stuff too, right? So we should also mention like this is only our second Canadian interview. Mm-hmm. Like this is our second Canadian conversation that we've had in like 20.
Wait, I'm not the first. Click.
The best.
Okay. Well, back on. No.
But you know, like that's at one point it got a little concerning. I'm like, we've done like we've talked to Japan, we've talked to like England, we've talked to Australia. Why can't we talk to anyone in Canada? And I know that like it's, I mean, we all know like it's a smaller demographic, it's a smaller population, and that's one thing. But at the same time, it also started to get a little concerning. I'm like, are we doing a US tour with no Canadian tour dates? Because it's actually starting to feel like that. Yeah. So I think that's, you know, if there's one thing to kind of look forward to coming out of social media. I mean, obviously we're still going to need to have a heavy push on that. But you know, it's starting to look on like the Canadian side of things, and maybe that was the secret reason behind Broadway Does Canada.
Yeah.
Canada.
It's funny because like I look at it from the standpoint of not that it's the case, but when you mentioned that, it came up to my mind of like I think it was either the Monkees, Westlife, or Oasis, and maybe it was all three, but like they just started getting popular in like the UK, and they had already migrated over to the States, and it's like, dude, we've been here for like 5 or 6 years. Like, why didn't you like us then? Now that we're gone, you want like it's almost like I look at it from like the girlfriend or the ex-girlfriend or ex perspective, where it's almost like it's like it's like whatever, it's my girlfriend. And the moments it's your ex, it's like I didn't know what I had. Like, well, now you don't. That's why you want it, because now it's not there. It's like a dog with a bone. It's like, here's a bone and here's a blue ball. It's like, I will eat the bone. And then as soon as another dog comes over and takes the ball, it's like, oh, that's my ball. What are you doing? It's like, you didn't want it to begin with, so stop it. But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I know a lot of the Canadian acts that we've had on have found like, their success, say, in Canada, but it's almost like to the minimal extent where it's like you want to be known all over. And yes, we have the platforms now that help, like your Spotify's, your YouTube's, social media, but even they will go migrate to the States or migrate wherever. Like, I think it was like Robin Ottolini, who has a great song with F-150. And I'm like, there's a part of me that's like, really, Canada? Like, that's great that we listen to it, but like, you just let her leave for the States, and now the States are going to eat her up. Like, why didn't you eat her up while she was here? Olivia Lunny. It's like, I've got like a few songs from Olivia Lunny on my soundtrack just through the launch. Same with Sons of Daughters, which just came through that. But I'm like, now they're going to Nashville. And then Nashville's going to be like, we took them and we made them stars. I'm like, we could have did that. What are you doing?
Like, who does that though? We do that.
And Robin's a great example, because it's been what, maybe like the span of 6-8 months from like small town Oakville girl playing like nowhere.
Yeah.
And now she'll be at this, she'll get nominated for something in November at the.
Well, I think it was funny because we had her on, her whole story, which I thought was interesting. Like, I like to find behind the scenes, like with any artist, especially when they're just starting off. And like, I'll be honest, when I first started this podcast, I wanted like the big, huge names, because I was like, man, I want to get myself exposure. But then I was like, let's look at it from a two-way street, where it's like, let's give them some exposure, and then you'll be known as the guy who, helped them on their way. And I'm like, that's cool too. So I think she had mentioned that it was like a full maybe year that she had the F-150. And then it was like, when can I release it? When can I release it? Oh, you can release it. And it didn't really gain traction until TikTok. And then TikTok made it a little bit bigger. And like, even now with our new songs that are coming out, it's like, yeah, I get it because I follow her and they're sponsors, but it's just interesting to me to be like, man, it took you like a full year. And that's not a knock. It's just like, how patient do you have to be? Like, there's times where I'm just sure that you're like, I'm going to release this. I just recorded it. Let's release it. It's like, how about we fine tune it first? It's like, okay, then can we release it? Then we got to look and wait another couple of months, figure out the timing. And I'm just like, I would just be like, screw you, I'm doing this now. And it's like, why didn't it become successful? It's like, because we didn't market it right. We didn't do this right. I'm like, oh, okay. So we're doing the same thing for the second track. They're like, you're cut. Yeah. I like find it interesting because, like, again, like the whole marketing side of things, like, and it kind of makes me feel old because I grew up with Faber Drive. And now he has a kid who came out with his own songs, right? And I'm just like, what? That's your kid? And I'm like,
see, that got ugly because you said he had a kid. I'm like, oh, baby, no, a kid that's putting out music. No, that's no.
Yeah, like I think he's like 21 or 22. So I mean, not disrespectfully to him because he's probably like 7 years younger than me. But in my mind, anyone that's younger than me by 5 years, I'm like, you're just a kid. Like, you're a kid to me. You're a kid to me. It's like a 25-year-old comes up to me like, we're getting drinks tonight, and I'm like, you're just a kid. They're like, I'm paying for your drink, and I'm just like, oh, well, you're an adult today. But after that's done, you're still a kid. Yeah. But no, it's an interesting concept because I like going off your point there of, getting that Canadian exposure, and now post-pandemic, I think people will start to come out, see shows, and then you get the kind of, then it's trying to balance both your social media and the live aspect. But if you're true to what you say you are on social media, and I'm not just saying that to you, I'm saying to anybody, then they know what to expect. Like, I really enjoy, Broadtree Presents, and then you do, obviously, doing a cover. So, like, I feel like when you do that live and you get, like, your niche market or niche people that will come and be like, I really like that you did this song, but now can you do Broadtree Presents? And you're like, okay, you have been with us for a while.
Yeah.
So that's where it all starts to perk up again. You're like, okay, so we are doing something. It might be like, again, the one or two people at first, they're like, great, we're getting there. Like, I feel if I went out on a podcast in person and someone's like, you're that guy from like Tobin Tonight, I'd be like, No, I'm not. Like, don't mention that. But at the same point, I'd be like, oh, it's kind of cool that someone knows I have this.
Yeah, I think one of the other, and I mean, being Canadian, you'll know this. Like, I think one of the biggest challenges, especially in Toronto, is going to be venues. I mean, we've like every indie venue is closed down. So I mean, with like Drake and Live Nation opened up a new venue.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be beautiful, but I'm like, well, we're not going to play there. So like, it's we're all the little like kind of like backs and bars that would have their own stage and concert rooms are gone. So it's going to be interesting to try to figure out where we're going to be able to play. But I think that'll come over time. So, I mean,
it's getting innovative, right? And it's like, I feel like in a social media world, like, again, when you do these Broadtree Presents and then do your covers, like, that's coming from what? Like the house that you're in right now, correct?
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, even that to an extent, like, I know, say, your Luke Combs, Rascal Flatts, all that had to adapt the same way. So it's like, it's kind of even playing field that way. Now, of course, when concerts open up, it's different, but there are still going to be people that are going on social media and like, man, like they're doing a live stream tonight. Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't think as much as people want to give it credit of like, oh yeah, once the pandemic is over, everyone's going to be like out in the streets going, yeah, let's go to concerts. There's still going to be a lot of people that are like, great, you do that, and I'm still going to stay inside and hope that these artists still do a few live streams every now and again because they're trying to ease their way into it. Like, I like playing sports, and if they open it up tomorrow, I'm still going to be like, you know what? I'll wait till next term to play a sport because I just want to see how this all pans out.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be like the casualty where it's like looking back in a history book where it's like, these people thought it was okay to play. It was not okay to play.
Yeah. Well, and also the younger, I've done a lot of kids theater, and I just like young people in general. So I've hung out with some young people, and young people are all about, everyone's so neurotic, and all of them are all about, and I'm not being like, oh, they're always on their cell phone. Like, really, it's funny because I know when I was growing up, being introverted was like irregular. Like, it was, there was introverted kids everywhere, but we weren't as common as the non. And so it's funny to me now to, go on Instagram and stuff and see everyone's that now. Like, all of the kids that are like preteens and teenagers, they're all very introverted now, which
I seen one the other day. Like, I pretty much, so I grew up, say, with Facebook and MSN, like for the most part, say MSN. So like it was your awakening to the world, I find, where it's like you used to be able to change things with lightning symbols on your name, and then people used to take the message and put in like song lyrics. Yeah, like I remember my friend one time had I think it was like a Black Eyed Peas featuring Justin Timberlake, Where's the Love? But I didn't know it was the song, so I just read it and I'm like, are you okay, Olivia? Like, is everything fine with you? And she's like, Brian, it's a song lyric. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like 5 steps behind everyone else here, okay? So
that was also part of the emo phase. Like, you just always look at like a Messenger and you just see like the My Chemical Romance and Taking Back Sunday lyrics, and you're like, oh, this, I think they need a tap on the shoulder. Let's just check in.
We were the generation, I feel like, that once we went into Facebook, we still had that MSN phase, because I think there's a lot of things where it's like when Facebook still had is like in your status, and then it's like you look back at say 2019 or 2010 people, like if you don't have them on your profile, but like you're about to add them and you can see all their old stuff, it's like Leah is going to bed, call or text, blah, blah, blah. Or it's like, Leah is having a bad day. Don't call or text. I thought it was funny when you had the people that was like, I am so pissed off today, call or text. I'm like, yeah, obviously I'm going to call or text a pissed off person. Like, why? Who is this for? But we grew into that. So I feel like it's a new wave where I'm not into TikTok. I'm not into Instagram as much. But when I scroll through the stories and there's like a story where it's like, how do introverts or like how do extroverts become introverts or introverts become extroverts? It's like they got invited to a party and then someone adopted them. I'm like, oh, okay, this is for like age 16. They're like, yeah, that's totally how it happened. I'm like, or you could just be a normal person at a party and be like, just talk to 2 people. We don't want you to be the life of the party, but at least engaged. They're like, no, my social battery isn't high enough. I'm like, well, recharge it.
Right? Oh my gosh.
It's not making fun of them. It's just, to me, it's like teasing them like someone would tease me the same way. But it's like, it's like, oh, my social battery's getting low. I'm like, well, here's a charger. I'm like, that's not how this works. I'm like, go take a nap. Go take a nap and then come back out. But I think even Coors has the commercial on Hockey Night in Canada where a guy, they all go to bed, like they all go to their own rooms, and like at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, they come back out and they all have a Coors, and they're like, I had a nap. It's like, me too. Let's interact. I'm like, or how about you just call it a night and be like, hey, all our batteries are low. Let's just figure this out at another point. But this is a generation that would be like 5 months later. It's like, I'm finally glad we got together. It's like, yeah, it only took us 5 months, Gary. Like Dave over here got married and went to the Bahamas by the time that you got together.
Oh my God. So one of the girls that I used to tour with in a show, so it was like, we played the two sisters in Frozen. And I obviously the pandemic hit. And then I saw this thing, because like we were like, not like crazy close, but like pretty close, because we were touring Canada together. Yeah. And got along super well and everything. And then I saw on Facebook that not only was she like pregnant, she had a fully formed baby that she had since the last time I saw her. And I didn't even know she was pregnant. So I phoned her and I was like, oh my God, you have a child? Like, what?
Yeah, she was like, "Who are you?" And you're like, "I'm a part of Broadtree. It's the thing where it's a broad and it's way and it's tree, country. Hello." She's not there anymore.
That's gonna do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Broadtree for coming on to the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying, thank you for listening and good night.